Well, finding rest, staving off burnout, recharging the spiritual bucket is what a renewal is all about. Some people travel to the Taizé community in France to worship in nature. Some people walk the Camino de Santiago in Spain to find quiet contemplation. Some stay at home and relax in their backyard, sipping iced tea and watching wildlife. Some take walks around the hills that surround us. But I have kids. So instead of monasteries or silence, we filled our time kayaking with manatees, paddleboarding in the shallows of the Florida Keys, and body surfing in South Carolina. I did not write. We barely watched any TV, although we did make our children watch Jaws. Yeah, play that through. Play that all the way through. I did read 3,000 pages of science fiction and a really interesting biography of Ernest Hemingway. I tried to convince the church staff to let me blog while I was away, and they flat out told me no. Rude. But they were absolutely right. I am not good at taking time away, and I needed to be pushed to just be. And even without the monastic silence, even without the challenges that we're facing and unfolding, even, hold on just a second here. Even with everything we were experiencing, God showed up. I didn't need to find a mountaintop in Europe to get fresh insight and faith. I just needed to stop, to rest, to realize that there was community right in front of me. We are one of those families that goes to church on vacation. Anybody else here do that? Yeah, my children hate this about vacations. So we went to First United Methodist Church in Key West, and we bumped into a retired United Methodist clergy person who we knew. If I ever needed a reminder of why community matters, I got it in Florida, of all places. Methodists are a connected people. The challenge for us is that our culture says spirituality is a solo sport. And it further says that you can find God on any mountain range and in nature and in a book, but God meets us there does not mean that our faith is meant to be a solitary experience. So while you're floating on a kayak or watching kids body surf in the sea, it's easy to have a spark of gratitude to God in that solitary moment. But what I noticed is that every time something beautiful or something funny happened, I looked right over at Reverend Amy and said, "Did you see that?" True joy wants a witness. God meets us in the quiet waters, but God designed us not to stay out on the water alone. And running into a retired clergy person that I knew wasn't a coincidence. It was actually a wake-up call. Here I was, hundreds of miles from home, attempting to unplug, intentional about living an isolated life for a few weeks, and what showed up? The church. We sang the same hymns. We shared the same liturgy. We recognized the same family ties bind us together. It struck me that while I went away to recharge, the gospel doesn't actually operate on solo power. What I realized is how important it is for us to live our Christian faith together. We need each other. This is John's exact point while he's writing his letter to the people scholars have named the Johannine community. He's writing to a very specific network of churches in Asia Minor around 90 AD, a little after Paul. Now, Asia Minor, for those of you who don't know, is mostly Turkey, but John is writing to the church in Ephesus. These are early Christians that are struggling. They've been expelled from the synagogue, mostly because John was poking the religious leaders there. And so they can't worship in a central location. They have to meet under secret, isolated from each other, under threat from the Roman Empire. And they have to meet in house churches, even separated further. So John is writing to remind them of this truth, that Jesus came to show us how to see God in one another. And that the primary way we experience God is through this structured life together. A life practicing the great commandment of loving one another. It's a beautiful sentiment. It sounds great on paper. Just love one another. But let's be honest, that love carries a lot of baggage in our culture. We use that word love so casually, it's easy to miss the radical demand John is placing on that word. We stretch the word love to mean a host of things. I love my spouse. I love my kids. I love coffee. I love a worn-out hoodie. I love science fiction novels. I love it when the Colorado Rockies win a game. We use the same word for the person we've pledged our life to as we do for a really good slice of key lime pie, which we had at every restaurant we went to. It was a taste testing of key lime pie. In Greek, the word love, our English word of love, has 4 kinds of meanings. There's eros love, meaning a passionate love you have for someone. There's philia, which means a deep friendship and affection you have. There's storage, which is a family love, a brotherly love. We experienced this love at the family reunion when we had to deal with my sister. That's the storage, means you love them despite everything that happens. And then there's agape love. Now, in the time of Jesus and John, the Greek community didn't really use the word agape love. It was a part of their vocabulary, but it wasn't ever written down. John adopted agape because he needed a word that says this love is different. This is a love that gives without expecting anything in return. A love that is sacrificial. John tells this church that they cannot see the invisible God, but they can know God when they show agape to one another. Church is not a place where you come to consume a sermon. You don't come to listen to music. We don't come for an entertaining show. Church is different. It is the specific, messy, beautiful place where we make sense of the world in the context of living together. Now, you can find community in a lot of places. There's a Dachshund meetup group that gathers at Garden of the Gods every Saturday morning. It's fantastic. You go to a dive bar, yoga studios, gyms, running clubs. But here, the community we claim is anchored in something deeper than our shared hobbies. It is about a sacrificial love we have for one another, whether you know them or not. One of Reverend Amy's deep loves is to do crossword puzzles on vacation. Sitting on a beach with a crossword, a big book of crosswords, and a pencil and a drink with a little umbrella in it is her ultimate happy place. Well, 3 days into our trip, disaster struck because her only pencil snapped. A real pencil. We didn't bring mechanical pencils. That would have made this not an issue. But we didn't do that. We had a real pencil. We stopped at 3 different stores: Walgreens, Piggly Wiggly, and this random gas station. And folks, there's an epidemic unfolding in our digital world. There are no traditional pencils to be found anywhere. And what do you never do with a crossword puzzle? You don't use a Amen. See, you know Amy's heart. So one day, a week later, while picking up sweet treats for breakfast at a local pastry cafe, Amy decided to ask the 2 young cashiers if they happened to have a pencil she could buy or borrow. Cashier 1 immediately reached under the counter. Yeah, you can just have this one. And cashier 2 immediately interjected. Wait, what if we need it? And cashier 1 said, why would we need a pencil? I'll just bring one from home tomorrow if we do. And seeing that the decision was already made, cashier 2 softened. and said, well, if we're going to give it to her, we should at least sharpen it first. And she took that pencil, went upstairs to the office, sharpened it to a fine point, and handed it back to Amy with a smile. At first, Cashier 2 saw this as an isolated interaction. She saw a tool on her side of the counter that belonged to her, and it separated her from the stranger on the other side. But in a matter of seconds, the dynamic shifted when Cashier 1 offered a bridge, and Cashier 2 stepped right into it, not just handing over a dull pencil, but going the extra mile so that Amy could do what she loved. It is and can seem like a mundane moment. It wasn't about the pencil. It's about people who are choosing connection over isolation. It's the reminder that we are not built to live solitary lives as islands floating through paradise. It is the reminder that running into a United Methodist pastor in the Florida Keys, in looking over at our family and saying, "Did you see that?" are not coincidences. God continues to interrupt our self-contained solo lives to remind us joy needs a witness. Joy wants a witness. Joy demands a witness.